In the golden fields of Savannah Hills, young Hailey Bennett faced an unimaginable danger. Her beloved German Shepherd, Max, was trapped by a massive python's crushing grip. Just when all hope seemed lost, a pride of wild lions emerged from the shadows. Or were they friend or foe? Hailey's heart raced as the lions charged forward, doing something she never expected: saving Max. Would you be brave enough to trust wild lions in this situation? Comment below and hit subscribe to discover more incredible stories like this. The late afternoon sky above Savannah Hills stretched endlessly, painted with hues of orange and lavender, signaling the close of another summer day in the small Texas town. Golden sunlight poured gently onto the sprawling grasslands, turning them into waves of amber silk swaying gracefully in the warm breeze. Savannah Hills, nestled beside a vast wildlife preserve, was a place where nature mingled intimately with daily life, and the townspeople proudly embraced this harmonious existence. At the edge of the preserve, down a winding gravel road lined with ancient oak trees, stood a modest but welcoming ranch house. Its white paint was chipped in places, and the wooden porch creaked beneath footsteps, but the warmth within made it more home than a house. In its backyard, a makeshift veterinary clinic bustled quietly, tended with care by Dr. Owen Bennett. Owen was a man in his early 40s, tall and sturdy, with broad shoulders that hinted at years of labor and compassion. His chestnut hair was touched lightly with silver at the temples, and deep lines framed eyes that had seen countless joys and sorrows alike. His gentle manner made him beloved by both the townspeople and the animals he cared for. Owen carried a profound sorrow from the loss of his wife, Emily, 5 years ago in a tragic car accident, an event that had left deep emotional scars, visible only through fleeting shadows that occasionally clouded his usually calm expression. His daughter, Hailey Bennett, was his steadfast assistant and greatest source of pride. At 12, Hailey possessed an unusual blend of bravery and tenderness. She had inherited her mother's hazel eyes, bright and curious, framed by strands of honey blonde hair perpetually escaping the loose braid that fell down her back. Slim and slightly tall for her age, Hailey moved with the careful agility learned from helping her father with injured wildlife. Despite the confidence she displayed, a lingering sadness from losing her mother made her quietly determined, always striving to prove herself capable and worthy of her father's trust. At Hailey's side, faithfully following wherever she went, was Max, the family's German Shepherd. Max was no ordinary pet. Once an esteemed search and rescue dog, he now wore his old age gracefully at 10 years, his fur speckled with silver streaks amid the black and tan markings. Despite the growing stiffness in his joints, his amber eyes still shone with wisdom and unwavering devotion, his ears constantly alert to any sign of danger. The day had begun like many others. Owen had tended to an injured hawk brought in by a concerned neighbor, Mr. Samuel Green, a retired postman known for his soft heart and enormous straw hat. Samuel was thin and wiry, with leathery skin from years spent under the Texas sun, and a demeanor gentle as a grandfather, even if he had none of his own. He'd left quickly after handing over the bird, confident in Owen and Hailey's abilities. Hailey had busied herself all morning assisting her father, gently preparing bandages and administering medications. Around midday, as the sun rose higher and temperatures climbed, Hailey and Max retired to the shade of the sprawling oak behind their home, where she sat sketching animals she dreamed of someday helping herself. As the afternoon waned, Owen received an urgent call from Mrs. Abigail Norris, an elderly woman whose prize stallion had fallen ill. Abigail was a stately woman in her 70s, known for her stern gaze softened by rare but genuine smiles. Short and slightly round, Abigail commanded respect through a quiet dignity that seemed to radiate from her very posture. Owen quickly gathered his supplies, kissed Hailey on the forehead, and left with the assurance that he'd be back before dark. Hailey watched her father's truck disappear in a cloud of dust, then returned inside to prepare dinner, humming softly to herself, unaware that anything was amiss. It was only as the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the fields, that she realized Max was nowhere to be found. At first, she wasn't overly concerned. Max often roamed briefly, sniffing around the edges of their property. But as minutes stretched into half an hour, anxiety blossomed in her chest. Hailey stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the horizon, calling softly, then more urgently, "Max, come here, boy." Her calls echoed unanswered into the silence of the approaching evening. Fear settled coldly in her stomach as Hailey grabbed her flashlight from the kitchen table and quickly pulled on her boots, stepping resolutely into the fading twilight. The grasses whispered softly against her legs as she moved through them, her voice occasionally rising to call out again. The sky darkened faster now, deep purple bleeding into navy, and the first stars appeared like tiny beacons above. Minutes turned slowly, and soon she found herself far from home, heart quickening as uncertainty loomed. As she approached a distant creek running through the preserve, a familiar low whine drifted faintly toward her on the breeze. Relief flooded her momentarily, then immediately evaporated into worry. Max's whining was not the relaxed sound of a dog simply exploring. It was a sharp, desperate sound that sent chills down Hailey's spine. "Max," she shouted, sprinting toward the creek, her flashlight beam slicing erratically through the gathering darkness. Finally reaching the edge, she stopped abruptly, gasping as the scene illuminated by her trembling flashlight unfolded before her. Max lay on the muddy bank, eyes wide with pain, his body struggling weakly against a powerful python, its thick coils tightening mercilessly around him. The dog whimpered softly, the sound heartbreakingly pitiful to Hailey's ears. Panic surged, threatening to freeze her, but Hailey clenched her fists, fighting down fear. She stepped closer, mind racing desperately for a solution. The python hissed ominously, its scales shimmering menacingly under the wavering flashlight. In that heart-pounding moment, Hailey understood that she had no choice but to act swiftly and courageously if she hoped to save Max's life. Her breath came fast and shallow, adrenaline pulsing through her veins. She glanced quickly around for anything she could use, a stick, a rock, anything. Before she could move further, however, a deeper, primal sound echoed from behind the tall grass across the creek, a sound that froze her to the spot. Hailey slowly raised her eyes, heart hammering, as she saw silhouetted figures emerging in the growing moonlight. There, unmistakably clear against the horizon, stood a pride of lions, majestic, powerful, their golden eyes locked on her and Max, unreadable in their intentions. Hailey's breath caught sharply in her chest, caught between two unimaginable dangers: the python strangling Max, and the approaching predators whose intentions remained terrifyingly uncertain. The last light of sunset vanished completely now, plunging the scene into stark moonlit clarity. Standing rigidly between these two perils, Hailey's young heart thundered wildly, trapped in a moment she knew would define everything that came after. The night deepened around Hailey like a thick curtain of ink, pierced only by the trembling beam of her flashlight and the pale silver light of the moon. The breeze, once warm, turned cool and unsettling as it rustled the tall grass around her, whispering warnings only nature could understand. She stood frozen, her heart pounding, between the python that still held Max in its crushing grip and the pride of lions slowly emerging from the shadows beyond the creek. Max let out another weak whimper, his breathing shallow. The great serpent's thick coils glistened, tightening fractionally with every second. Hailey clutched a sturdy branch she had found, knuckles white, weighing her options in paralyzing silence. But the lions, they did not rush. They observed, regal, silent, watching her and Max like ancient judges in the moonlight. The largest among them, a male with a thick, golden mane tinged with gray around the edges, stepped forward. His shoulders rolled powerfully with every step, muscles moving like coiled rope beneath his tawny coat. A long scar ran across his muzzle, a silent testimony to many battles past. He stopped just beyond the creek's edge, eyes locked with Hailey's, unreadable but not unkind. Behind him were four others, two lionesses and two younger males. One of the lionesses, lean and sharp-eyed, crept forward slightly, ears flicking back at every sound. She exuded a fierce maternal energy, the kind born from protecting cubs in dangerous terrain. The younger lions followed the alpha with cautious but respectful distance. Hailey's breathing was ragged, but her instincts, though sharpened from growing up with her father in the wild, kicked in. These lions didn't see her as prey. Not yet. Perhaps not at all. She remembered something her father once said while treating a wounded bobcat. Fear clouds intention. Animals read that better than any doctor reads a heartbeat. "I'm not your enemy," she whispered aloud, voice trembling but clear. Then, almost as if on cue, the alpha lion turned his gaze from her to the python, and something in his posture shifted. His tail twitched once, then he growled, low and guttural. The reaction was immediate. The lioness launched forward, a streak of gold and muscle. Her claws extended as she lunged at the python. The serpent recoiled, hissing furiously, its grip on Max faltering for just a moment. The other lions followed, circling, striking in coordination with primal precision. Hailey stepped back instinctively, eyes wide, as the chaos unfolded. Max yelped and writhed as the coils loosened. The lioness delivered the final blow with her powerful jaws, snapping down on the snake's neck with brutal finality. The python writhed violently once, then went limp. The lions stepped back, panting, blood on their paws, but their eyes never turned aggressive toward Hailey. Instead, they turned and disappeared as silently as they had arrived, fading into the tall grasses like spirits of the land. Only the scarred alpha lingered a moment longer. He looked once more at Hailey, calm, piercing, and then vanished into the darkness. She dropped to her knees beside Max. His chest still rose and fell, but his eyes were glazed with pain and fear. "It's okay," she whispered, gently brushing his ears, her own tears finally spilling. "You're safe now. We're safe." Suddenly, a rustling from the trees made her flinch. Emerging with a flashlight and a large rifle slung across his shoulder was a man in khaki field gear, his tall figure moving briskly toward her. "Whoa, Hailey," he called. "Hailey Bennett." She looked up, startled. "Yes, how do you know me?" The man came closer, breath catching when he saw Max. "I'm Logan Price. I work at the Horizon Ridge Wildlife Center. I heard on the emergency radio there might be a python loose. When we did head count earlier today, we realized one of our Burmese pythons was missing. This must be the one." Logan was in his late 30s, with weather-worn skin and a deeply lined brow. His dark brown beard was trimmed close to his face, and his eyes, hazel with hints of green, showed fatigue, guilt, and urgency. "We had flash flood damage 2 nights ago. One of the gates was damaged. We tried to secure everything, but obviously this slipped through." He crouched next to Max, gently assessing the bite wounds. "He's lucky," he murmured. "Really lucky. This could have crushed his spine." Hailey nodded, still trembling. "The lions, they saved him." Logan froze. "Lions? You saw lions here?" She nodded again. "A whole pride. They didn't hurt me. They killed the snake." He stared at her for a long moment, clearly torn between disbelief and awe. There's an old pride that roams near the preserve edge, but they've never been this close to the creek. You must have gotten their attention somehow. Hailey looked down at Max. "He means the world to me." Maybe they saw that. Together, they fashioned a stretcher from a tarp and thick sticks. Logan carried most of the weight, and Hailey guided the flashlight along the winding path home. As they neared the ranch, the porch light was already on, casting a beacon across the fields. Owen stood waiting, arms folded tight, eyes filled with worry. When he saw Hailey, relief washed over his face like a wave. He ran to her, pulling her into a trembling embrace. "You scared me, Hailey. What happened?" Hailey opened her mouth, but instead of answering, she turned to Max. "We need to help him first." Inside, Owen moved swiftly, his trained hands working with Logan's help. The veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and hay, warm and familiar. Logan explained the python's escape, taking responsibility, while Owen remained calm but firm. As Max was stabilized, Hailey finally recounted the lion attack, their unexpected rescue, and her father listened with furrowed brows. He didn't doubt her, but it shook him deeply. "It's like something out of a legend," he said quietly. Later that night, as Hailey sat by Max's makeshift bed in the clinic, her fingers gently brushing his fur, Logan handed her a worn field guide. "Take a look at that tomorrow. It's about predator empathy patterns. Lions, wolves, even elephants, they sometimes respond to distress calls from other species. Maybe it wasn't just luck tonight." Hailey nodded sleepily, her eyes never leaving Max. The sky outside the Bennett ranch had shifted from velvet night to a smoky gray dawn. Thin streaks of light stretched above the horizon, painting soft golden strokes across the dewy fields. Inside the small veterinary clinic, everything was still. Hailey sat cross-legged beside Max's makeshift bed, her back against the cabinet, a blanket wrapped around her narrow shoulders. Her fingers rested gently on the old dog's rib cage, feeling the slow, steady rise and fall of his breathing. For now, he was safe, but sleep didn't come. Her eyes, though glassy with exhaustion, refused to close. Images from the night surged like a flood behind her eyelids every time she tried. The glint of the python scales, the way Max had whimpered, half suffocated, and then the lions, their silent arrival, the way they had moved, regal and terrifying, yet merciful. Hailey didn't know what to make of it all. She only knew one thing with absolute clarity. Something had changed in her that night. Across the room, Logan Price, the wildlife center worker who had helped save Max, slept uneasily in a chair with his hat tilted over his face. The flickering clinic light cast long shadows across his rugged features. Logan had offered to stay overnight, citing both guilt and concern. Owen, grateful but visibly rattled, had returned to his room only after Hailey promised she'd wake him if Max's condition changed. Hailey's thoughts drifted to her mother, Hailey Bennett. She remembered the scent of her mother's lavender soap and the way her laugh used to echo in the kitchen like music. Emily had been tall and graceful, with wavy chestnut hair often pulled into a simple bun, and kind eyes that always noticed the smallest things, like Hailey's mood or a scratch behind Max's ear. She had been the town's elementary music teacher, known for her soft voice and the way she brought quiet students out of their shells with nothing but a song and patience. But that spring morning 3 years ago had stolen all of that. A delivery truck had blown a stop sign at the county intersection. Hailey had survived the crash with a broken arm and a concussion. Emily had not. Hailey's last memory of her mother wasn't her face. It was her voice, calling her name a second before the world turned white with noise and shattered glass. Since then, Hailey had carried a hollow ache. Not just grief, but shame. That she had lived. That she hadn't been able to do anything. Her father never blamed her. No one did. But Hailey blamed herself in quiet moments. And that blame had formed invisible walls around her confidence, her courage. Until last night. "I won't lose anyone else," she whispered aloud, her voice small in the dim light. Not Max. Not ever again. A sudden knock on the back screen door startled her. Logan stirred but didn't wake. Hailey stood, wrapped the blanket tighter, and crept to the door. Outside stood a woman, mid-50s, holding a thermos and a brown paper bag. Her curly auburn hair was speckled with gray, and she wore a sheriff's department windbreaker over jeans and boots. "Sheriff Val Avery," the woman said, her voice calm but firm. "Your father called me early this morning. Said there was an incident involving a python and wild predators." Hailey nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Sheriff Avery stepped inside, her eyes sharp but not unkind. She was shorter than Owen, but stood with an air of grounded authority. She'd served the town for nearly 20 years and had been a single mother most of that time, raising 2 sons while managing the growing demands of the county. Her demeanor was no nonsense, but she had a reputation for protecting her people fiercely, especially the young. "Your dad's making coffee," she said, glancing toward the kitchen. "Thought you could use something more substantial." She handed Hailey the thermos and the bag. Inside were 2 butter biscuits and a handful of apple slices. Hailey murmured a thank you and sat back beside Max. The sheriff crouched nearby, her gaze softening at the sight of the wounded dog. "I lost a partner once," she said quietly. "Not a dog, a human. Deputy. His name was Miller. He stepped in front of a bullet for a kid he barely knew. When I visited his mother after the funeral, she said he was just doing what he always did, choosing people. That stuck with me." Hailey looked up. "Max did that too." "Yes," the sheriff nodded. "And I think he did too." A few hours later, Logan roused and quietly joined Owen outside, where a new figure had arrived. Camille Torres, the director of Horizon Ridge Wildlife Center. Camille was tall and composed, in her early 40s, with almond skin, thick black curls, and a voice that carried even when she whispered. She wore a brown canvas jacket and dark hiking pants, and her presence radiated both concern and restrained authority. "We need to talk," she told Owen, motioning for Logan to join them. "Not just about the python, but about the pride of lions," Hailey reported. "If they're leaving the outer boundary of the preserve, we're facing something much bigger." "I've lived here my whole life," Owen said. "I've never heard of lions rescuing anything, let alone a dog." Logan, still pale, replied, "Neither have I." But she's not lying, and I don't think it was a coincidence. Camille frowned, then pulled out a folder from her backpack. 2 months ago, we tagged the alpha male of that pride. He's older, scarred, but still dominant. We've tracked his pride, shifting closer to human areas, but last week, their movements became erratic. We think something, or someone, is disturbing the natural balance. Owen's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about poachers?" "Possibly," she nodded. "Or worse, illegal baiting to draw animals toward camera traps for social media videos. We've had suspicious activity at the southern fence. And now, a snake on your land. A pride pushing toward your creek." Back inside, Hailey fed Max a bit of water through a dropper. His eyes fluttered open, dull but warm. "You came back," she whispered. He pressed his muzzle against her arm weakly. She smiled for the first time that morning. By late afternoon, the storm that had been hovering finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows, and thunder echoed over the plains. Owen placed a soft quilt over Max and moved a cot into the corner for Hailey. But she didn't sleep. Instead, she stared out the rain-smeared window and made a promise. "Whatever's hurting the animals, I'm going to stop it. I'm not afraid anymore." Outside, deep in the soaked grassland, golden eyes blinked once, then vanished. The storm that had pelted Savannah Hills through the night left behind a heavy stillness, the kind that made the air thick and electric. Raindrops clung to the grass like beads of glass, and the distant sky still rolled with a low grumble of thunder. Inside the Bennett Barn-Turn Clinic, Max slept soundly under a wool blanket, his breathing no longer strained. But Hailey's thoughts, despite the calm, were far from still. The night's events played on repeat in her mind. The serpent's suffocating coils, the pounding of her heart, and the slow, silent approach of the lions. The memory of that moment, the one when she thought she might lose Max, had carved itself into her like a scar. It wasn't over. Not really. After a quick breakfast, Hailey pulled on her boots and slipped out before anyone could stop her. She left a note for her father and took her small backpack, stuffing it with a flashlight, gloves, a compass, and a walkie-talkie. Max needed to recover, but she couldn't sit still. Something was wrong in those woods, something deeper than one escaped python. And part of her already knew it wasn't just about animals. She crossed the back fence line and headed southeast toward the preserve's fringe, following a trail of broken branches and disturbed soil, signs left behind by something large and hurried. As the morning sun cut through the trees, Hailey's mind turned over one question. Why had the lions helped? They hadn't attacked her. They'd attacked the snake. And, somehow, it had felt deliberate. 2 hours into her trek, she reached the clearing near the creek where it had all happened. The remains of the python had been taken, either by scavengers or rangers. But Hailey noticed something strange in the mud near where the lions had stood. A boot print. Not hers, not her dad's, and definitely not Logan's, whose hiking shoes had a distinct, circular tread. She squatted, inspecting it. It was deep, heavy, likely a man. But what bothered her more was what lay beside it. A torn strip of bright blue fabric, oddly synthetic, like part of a camping tarp or gear bag. She pocketed the fabric and continued south, not knowing she was being watched. High on the hill above her, hidden behind thick cedar brush, a man peered through binoculars. His name was Silas Dean, a lanky man in his late 40s with sun-worn skin, a patchy beard, and eyes that flickered with suspicion. Silas had lived off the grid for years in a shack deep inside the no-man's land between the town and the protected preserve. Locals called him a hermit, a conspiracy nut, or worse, but Sheriff Avery had always left him alone. He avoided town, and town avoided him. What no one knew was that Silas had recently begun working with poachers, reluctantly at first, then for money. They used his shack as a blind for baiting rare predators with injured animals. One of those baits, a juvenile lion, had escaped 3 weeks ago, prompting the pride's growing aggression. Silas hadn't intended for any of this to go so far. But now, with the python dead, the girl alive, and rangers sniffing around, he knew trouble was coming. Back below, Hailey followed a faint trail deeper into the underbrush, pausing only when she came to a small ridge. Beyond it, she saw something shocking, a set of cages camouflaged under netting and brush. One held a wounded lynx, pacing restlessly. Another was empty, blood staining the corner straw. She pulled out her walkie-talkie. "Dad? Come in. I found something. You're not going to like it." A hiss of static. Then Owen's voice. "Where are you?" "I followed the old stream path south. Past the clearing. There are cages here. One animal's still trapped. I'm on my way. Don't touch anything." But someone else had heard her. Silas stood just feet behind her now, his rifle slung lazily over one shoulder, his expression unreadable. "You're a long way from home, little miss." Hailey spun around, nearly dropping the radio. "I didn't touch anything," she said quickly. "I know what you were doing." His voice wasn't cruel, just flat. "And you shouldn't be here." "The lions are acting strange," Hailey said carefully, watching his eyes. Something scared them. Something hurt one of their cubs. Silas looked away. It wasn't supposed to go like this. They said no kids would get hurt. "Who are they?" Before he could answer, a low growl rippled through the woods. Hailey turned her head slowly. Across the clearing, standing as if summoned by the sound of her fear, was the scarred alpha lion. His golden mane looked darker in the shadow, his amber eyes locked on Silas. Behind him, 2 other lions flanked the trees, silent, tense. Silas raised his rifle, but Hailey stepped between them. "Don't," she whispered. "They didn't come for me." The lion's gaze didn't waver. Hailey held her breath, heart pounding, recalling the choice she had made the night before, to stay, not to run. That same choice pressed against her now. Silas, unnerved, slowly lowered his rifle. "They're guarding something, not hunting. They're protecting us from people like you," Hailey replied, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Then from behind, the crunch of boots, Owen, Logan, and Sheriff Avery emerged with urgency and purpose. Camille wasn't far behind, her phone held up to document the cages and the wounded lynx. Silas didn't run. He simply dropped the rifle and muttered, "It was never supposed to be this big." Sheriff Avery stepped forward, hand on her holster. "You'll tell us exactly how big." As Silas was handcuffed and led away, the lions slowly backed into the forest, vanishing like smoke on wind. Hailey turned, catching the eye of the alpha one last time. He blinked once, slow and deliberate, before slipping beyond the trees. Later, back at the clinic, Owen cleaned a scratch on Hailey's cheek while Max rested beside them. Logan sat with Camille, reviewing footage and maps. Hailey glanced at her father. "I had to stay," she whispered. "I couldn't leave Max. Not again." Owen kissed the top of her head. "I know, and I've never been prouder." The following days passed like a slow-blooming revelation. The storm had cleared, the poacher was in custody, and the immediate threat to Savannah Hills had passed. But something in Hailey Bennett had shifted forever. She had seen nature's teeth and tenderness all in the same hour, and the memory of that golden-maned lion standing between her and danger continued to flicker behind her eyes like a flame refusing to die out. Much was recovering steadily. Though the snake's bite had left him weak, the old German shepherd had proven himself stubborn as ever, rallying under Hailey's care. His eyes, though tired, tracked her with unwavering focus. He would never be the same. None of them would, but he was alive. Hailey had begun keeping a journal. Not of feelings. She found those too slippery to pin down, but of events. She wrote about the boot prints, the cages, the lynx that had been relocated to the reserve hospital. And most of all, she wrote about the lions. She referred to the alpha as Ashmane for the dusky streaks along his golden mane, and imagined his pride as silent guardians of the wild, old as the land itself. One afternoon, while helping her father in the back barn clean out some old crates, Hailey heard a knock at the front gate. Sheriff Val Avery stood there, hat in hand, flanked by someone unfamiliar. The new arrival was a woman in her mid-30s, tall with an athletic build and sun-kissed skin. Her raven black hair was pulled into a low braid that framed a sharply intelligent face. She wore a forest green ranger's jacket, tan cargo pants, and mud-splattered boots. A wildlife emblem was stitched onto her shoulder patch. "This is Ranger Dana Hollowell," Sheriff Avery said. "She's been stationed at the southern perimeter of the preserve. Camille called her in after your discovery. We thought you might want to talk to her." Dana stepped forward and offered a warm, firm handshake. Her grip was strong, and her smile was genuine. "I've been tracking that pride for almost a year now. Ashmane, as you call him. I've seen him twice. Never that close to humans before. What happened with you? It doesn't match their known behavior." Hailey invited them inside, where Owen poured coffee for the adults while Hailey sat cross-legged on the floor beside Max, gently stroking his fur. Dana knelt next to her. "Camille told me you didn't run when the lions came." "I couldn't," Hailey said simply. "Max would have died, and they weren't threatening me." Dana nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes animals surprise us, but it's rare they choose mercy over instinct." "Maybe it wasn't mercy," Hailey said. "Maybe they were protecting something that mattered to them. Or someone." Dana looked intrigued. "I've seen Ashmane do strange things before. Once, I found him circling a trapped elk calf. Never touched it. Just roared until the mother returned. But this was different." Owen spoke up from the counter. "She's been having dreams. Hailey, I mean. Wakes up talking about the pride, about the forest." "I'm not dreaming," Hailey said quietly. "It's more like remembering, but things I never lived." Dana exchanged a glance with Sheriff Avery, who raised an eyebrow. "There are stories," Dana said slowly. "Old ones. About people bonded to animals. About protectors of the land. They're not in science books, but they survive in oral traditions, especially among native trackers. They say some children are chosen, marked even by the wild." "Chosen," Owen repeated, skeptical. "To witness. To carry something forward," Dana replied. "Doesn't mean she's magic. It means she listens better than most." Hailey didn't say anything. She just kept her hand on Max's paw. That evening, Dana invited Hailey to join her on a patrol run through the lower preserve. With Owen's hesitant blessing, Hailey packed a small field bag and rode shotgun in Dana's rust-colored Jeep, which bore the faint scent of pine and old leather. They drove for an hour through winding paths where the grass grew tall and untouched, past clusters of deer and the occasional hawk silhouetted against the setting sun. At last, they reached a ridge that overlooked the same creek where everything had changed. They got out. The light was golden again, just as it had been that night. Hailey's breath caught. "There," Dana whispered, pointing to a distant hill across the shallow valley. Ashmane stood at the crest, framed in the light, his mane catching the sun like a crown. The rest of the pride lounged behind him, 7 in total, 2 of them young cubs playing near the paws of a watchful lioness. They weren't hunting, they were watching. Hailey stepped forward slightly, not daring to make a sound. Ashmane's head turned. Their eyes met across the distance. He blinked. Once. Slow. The same way he had the night he saved Max. "Why did he help me?" Hailey asked, her voice hushed. Dana crouched beside her. "I don't know. But I think he recognized something. Courage, maybe, or pain. A sudden gust of wind stirred the grass. The pride stood, one by one, and began to move deeper into the hills. Ashmain lingered last, glancing back only once before vanishing into the golden dusk. That night, back at the ranch, Hailey wrote by flashlight in her notebook. She sketched the ridge, the lions, and, at the center of it all, a small silhouette, herself. Savannah Hills shimmered beneath the early summer sun, washed in a golden haze that made even the rusted wire fences look like strands of copper. The grass had grown tall again, brushing at Hailey Bennett's knees as she walked through the lower pasture with Max, trotting a few paces behind her. His gait still bore the stiffness of recovery, but the strength in his legs had returned, just enough for short walks, and just enough to make Hailey's heart swell with quiet joy. Max had a new scar on his flank, a pale crescent just below his ribs, but it no longer pained him. In fact, he wore it like a badge, much like Hailey had begun to wear her experience, not with pride, but with reverence. Some memories didn't demand celebration. They demanded acknowledgement and care and silence. It had been 3 weeks since the lions had saved them, since Silas Dean had been arrested, the illegal cages dismantled, and the preserve strengthened with new funding and ranger patrols. The town, usually sleepy and slow to change, had stirred awake. The story had spread, first in whispers, then in front-page headlines. Lion save girl and dog from python in Texas wilderness. Most thought it was exaggerated. A few called it myth. But those who knew Hailey didn't question it, especially not her father. Owen Bennett had changed, too. He now smiled more often, tired smiles, yes, but fuller ones. He watched Hailey with the attentiveness of a man who had almost lost everything and refused to waste another second. They had rebuilt their routine, but something new had woven itself between them. A mutual respect that came not just from love, but from surviving something impossible together. That morning, Hailey stood in the barn with her journal open, sketching the silhouette of Ashmain, the lion who had stared death in the eye for her. His golden mane spilled like fire across the page. On the opposite page, she had written a list. To do before I'm 18. Learn to track big cats. Ask Dana for training. Study animal behavior. Dad says start with horses. Apply to wildlife veterinary programs. Visit African savanna, real lions. Tell Ashmain's story, properly. Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock. Standing in the barn doorway was a familiar face. Elena Marks, a former student of Owen's and now a documentary filmmaker in her late 20s. She was petite, with a pixie cut and expressive blue eyes that always seemed to be noticing things others didn't. She wore a faded denim shirt and camera rig strapped across her torso. I heard about what happened, she said softly. Camille gave me clearance to film a piece on the preserve. I was hoping to speak with you and your dad. Hailey hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but I want to tell him my way. Wouldn't have it any other way, Elena said with a smile. Later that afternoon, they sat on the porch. Elena recorded while Hailey, with Max lying beside her, recounted everything. Not just the night of the attack, but the grief of losing her mother, the quiet doubt that had lived in her chest like a coiled shadow, and how that shadow finally unraveled when a lion chose to spare her instead of run. When did you know you wanted to be a vet? Elena asked. Hailey looked at her father through the lens. I always did. But now I don't just want to fix things. I want to protect what's wild. Not just animals, but the parts of us that still know how to listen to the earth. Max gave a soft grunt, his nose twitching in the breeze. That night, a small celebration was held at the Horizon Ridge Wildlife Center. Camille Torres and Ranger Dana Hollowell had organized it quietly. No banners, no speeches, just a gathering of people who had fought in their own ways for something bigger than themselves. Camille, her curls pinned back and wearing a simple cream blouse, raised a glass of iced tea. To the ones who protect, whether by law, by paw, or by heart. Laughter and clinks followed. Sheriff Avery gave Hailey a hand-carved wooden whistle, shaped like a lion's head. Just in case you ever need to call your friends back, she winked. As dusk settled over the fields, Hailey wandered away from the group toward the hill behind the center. She stood alone at the top, the wind tugging gently at her braid. Behind her, fireflies began to glow. Ahead, the horizon stretched unbroken. Then, faint but unmistakable, came a low rumble, deep, distant, like thunder with purpose. A lion's roar. Hailey closed her eyes, not out of fear but peace. Somewhere out there, Ashmane still roamed, his pride at his side. He would never belong to her, and she would never try to cage him. But they had met once at the edge of life and death, and in that moment, they had understood each other. She wasn't alone anymore. Not really. Not ever. Sometimes, the fiercest protectors come from the wildest places. And sometimes, what seems dangerous or untamable may carry more courage and compassion than we expect. Hailey's story reminds us that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about standing your ground when everything inside you says run. It's about choosing love over fear, even in the darkest moments. In our everyday lives, we might not face lions or pythons, but we all face moments of doubt, of loss, of hard choices. And in those moments, may we find the courage to protect what matters, to believe in unexpected help, and to never lose faith in the good that still exists in this world. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are never truly alone. Comment your thoughts below, and if you believe in the power of love, loyalty, and second chances, write amen in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another story of hope. May God bless you and everyone you love.